What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be breaking down the brand new underbarrel G-grip attachment in Black Ops 6 to see exactly how it works and how it stacks up against the other underbarrel grips, as well as how it stacks up against the Strelok laser, since it is kind of a hybrid of the two. So let's just start this off with the basics. When it comes to the stated pros in the menu, we have Recoil Stabilization, which is something we don't normally see in this game. That's a stat that isn't quantified in the advanced stats. And the only other attachment I can remember, at least, that has this attached to it is the full auto extended mag on the SWAT 556 Grau conversion kit. As far as I can remember, at least in Black Ops 6, this characteristic isn't tied to any other attachment in the game. But then on top of that, we get a horizontal recoil improvement, and we get Hipfire to ADS accuracy, which is the same stat improvement we see with the Strelok laser, although to a lesser degree, but we're going to be looking at that in just a little bit. And when it comes to the downsides of this, the only downside is it does have a visible laser when you aim down sight, but not when you're hip firing. Also, when it comes to the availability of this attachment, it's not available on every gun in the game. However, it is available on all of the SMGs and assault rifles aside from the PP919. And then finally, for the basics, in order to unlock this, it is in the Battle Pass for Season 4 on the 7th page. So it does take some grinding to get this unlocked, unless you buy Black Cell or just spend a bunch of money on skipping tiers. And with that out of the way, let's dive into the comparison here, and we're going to start it off with our horizontal recoil comparison. With this grip, I checked on a bunch of the SMGs and assault rifles, and while there are variances with some of the other underbarrel grips as far as how much they'll help horizontal recoil, it will change a bit from gun to gun. As far as I can see, this one is always going to give you a 20% improvement to your horizontal recoil control. And let's have a look at a side-by-side comparison with the FFAR using some of the other grips that help with horizontal recoil control. And as we can see here, the vertical grip is going to be helping us the most as far as that horizontal recoil goes at 45% on this particular gun. That does vary though. The Ranger grip helps by 30%, and then like I said, the G grip gives us a 20% improvement to horizontal recoil, and you can see that reflected in the recoil plots. All of them are noticeably better in that horizontal recoil department compared to the base recoil of the gun. But the G grip is the worst of the three when it comes to how much deviation we're seeing with that horizontal recoil. And that's not surprising at all, since we can actually see exactly what the values are here for our horizontal recoil improvement. But I also wanted to take a little bit of a look here at Recoil Stabilization, which historically in Call of Duty games that have used that stat heavily, this is effectively referring to the side-to-side bounce or deviation from the recoil path. And part of it seems to be helping visually, but it's not just visual, it also helps with our recoil pattern. And the reason I chose the FFR in particular here is when you look at the base recoil, especially after the first several shots that you fire, you can see there's a lot of side-to-side bounce there and deviation from that recoil path as it follows the path upward. And while it does appear that the vertical grip and the Ranger grip do actually improve this area, even though it's not really stated anywhere, it could be just part of the horizontal recoil control as well, helping with that. If you look really carefully at the G grip, you can see that there's a much more straight line. There's less deviation from that path with that recoil pattern. It's fairly subtle when comparing it to the other grips, but it's very noticeable when comparing to the base recoil. So that's definitely a helpful attribute of this. At least with some guns like the FFAR that have this side-to-side bounce. Not all of the guns in this game have much of that, and in many cases it's really just not necessary to even try to improve in that area, since you won't really notice since it's not a problem to begin with. Now on top of the actual recoil patterns, we also see a very slight visual improvement with this recoil stabilization added on, although it is quite subtle and it's the type of thing you have to be looking hard for, especially with iron sights here. If you pay really close attention, primarily focusing on the rear sight and how much that's bouncing around relative to the front sight, without the G grip, it bounces side to side a little bit more, but it's not a crazy difference by any means. Additionally, with an optic on, you can also see how this can have a slight impact on our visual recoil. Without the G grip, there's just a bit more of that bounciness with the reticle itself. It just bounces around a little bit more than when you are using the G grip. At the end of the day, visually, I don't think this makes enough of a difference to really change the outcome of gunfights, at least not very often. And the primary benefits you'll see here are to your actual recoil path. So there we go, that's the recoil side of things. If you are going for the absolute best recoil control, especially with an underbarrel grip, the vertical grip will still be your best bet more often than not. However, the vertical grip goes all in on one stat, whereas the G grip diversifies a little bit, and like we said at the beginning, it overlaps with the Strelok laser at least to a degree by improving your hipfire to aim down sight accuracy. And what this means is as you're in the process of aiming down sight, your gun gets more and more accurate right up into the point where you are fully aimed down sight and then you are fully accurate to your point of aim. So I just did a quick test here, firing 16 rounds, because the first time I accidentally fired an additional round, so I meant to do 15, but we're doing 16 rounds here. And I just put it in semi-auto mode. This is just firing one shot at a time, and for each shot, I just tried to fire it very shortly after aiming down sight. There's a little bit of variance between each shot, but I made sure I had some variance for all of these tests. And as you can see, when putting the G grip on, this absolutely improves that accuracy when you're in that transition period between hipfire and aiming down sight. I didn't get fully aimed down sight in any of these situations, and yet we can see a much tighter pattern with the G grip compared to no G grip in these situations. So that can absolutely be helpful, just like with the Strelok laser. However, I also wanted to compare with the Strelok laser, and it just reminded me how amazing the Strelok laser is. I tried to get my timings very similar while using the Strelok laser, and the results here are pretty crazy, as you can see. While I did have one flyer that I shot a little bit too early, 15 out of my 16 rounds went into literally the exact same hole without ever getting fully aimed down sight with the Strelok laser. So it's obvious that the Strelok is still your best bet if you're going for this particular stat. And the G grip is not a full replacement for the Strelok laser, but it's kind of a middle ground. It's something that can help you out a little bit. It'll help you get a bit more accurate in that transition period, but not nearly as crazy accurate as the Strelok laser will. And speaking of lasers, of course, we want to look at the downside here, and this is how visible is this G-grip laser? Is it more visible than the Strelok laser or any of the other lasers in the game? Or maybe less visible or identical? And as far as I can tell, I tested it on a few different maps in a few different locations. They appear to be 100% identical. And what that means in practical terms is on almost every single map in this game, I wouldn't worry too much about your laser visibility. It's highly unlikely in a realistic gameplay scenario with all the movement and craziness that's going on and all the other visuals that people have to pay attention to. It's highly unlikely they're going to be seeing that laser before already knowing about your presence and also having enough time to react to that information and plan accordingly. However, there is one map exception here, and this is Protocol. For whatever reason, lasers are much brighter on Protocol, and the G-grip is no exception here. It's also quite bright on that map. So with that map in particular, you may want to be a little bit more careful about your laser usage. That doesn't mean that you can't use lasers on that map. It's just going to be less effective on Protocol compared to any other map in the game. And there we go. That's going to wrap it up for the new G-grip underbarrel in Black Ops 6. And overall, I do think it's an interesting attachment. I'd love to see more attachments like this that work kind of as a hybrid and allow you to make some more interesting builds while getting some benefits from different categories. I think it's a really neat idea that could help bring some more attachment variety into the game. And when it comes to the G-grip in particular, I do see myself using this on some builds here or there. It's definitely not going to be a go-to attachment for me. Oftentimes I want faster sprint speed with my underbarrel, so I'll go with the Ranger grip, which also gives a bit better horizontal recoil control. Or if I really want to max out on horizontal recoil control, I'm going with the vertical grip. But if there's a situation where I want to get some horizontal recoil control, my sprint out time is pretty good on my builds, but I'm lacking a bit in the aim down sight time department, well, then the G-grip is a good option because it allows me to get that little bit of additional accuracy as I'm transitioning from hipfire into aiming down sight, while at the same time getting a notable amount of horizontal recoil control. Now, of course, these are just my thoughts, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about the G-grip in those comments down below. Are you guys generally happy with how they balance this? Do you guys agree that we should see more attachments like this that help bridge the gap between different attachment categories? Just let me know all of those thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.